One great way to visualize and track safety is with bow tie risk analysis. We learned a little about this in the overview video. Let's review the different parts of this tool to understand how it works. In the center of each bow tie is the hazard. This hazard is connected to a top event. The left side of the tool focuses on prevention. Each threat to that top event is listed on the far left, as well as a series of actions or barriers that can be taken to prevent it. The right side focuses on mitigation. On the far right are a list of possible consequences if the top event happens. In between are the actions or barriers that can be done to mitigate the consequences. Another word for a barrier is a control. A control is an act, object, or system intended to prevent or mitigate an unwanted event. These controls can be small or large actions. Are they equal in importance? No. Some are more essential than others at preventing the top event from happening. These controls we'll call critical controls. They are crucial. They need to be working 100% of the time to prevent top events. As you can imagine, knowing which controls are critical will help you to prioritize your activities. Are inspections critical? Testing? Maintenance? When we can develop a list of safety-critical controls, we know where to focus. So how can we identify the critical controls? We can ask ourselves a few key questions. First, does the control appear on multiple threats lines and/or bow ties? Second, if the control fails, would there be a high probability of the top event happening? Third, are there only a few controls to prevent the threat? Next, is the control considered critical based on expert judgment? An example of this might be when a barrier failed previously and caused an incident to occur. Finally, if all of the other controls fail, will this control stop the top event from happening? Another way of looking at the importance of controls is by using James Reason's Swiss cheese theory. Swiss cheese is famous for its holes. What if we thought about controls as individual slices of Swiss cheese stacked between the threat and the top event, and between the top event and the consequences? Each slice, each control, can block the threat from getting through to the top event, or from bringing about the consequences of that top event. But each slice isn't perfect. Each slice has holes or weaknesses. Weaknesses in a control might include equipment malfunctions, inspections that don't get done, procedures that aren't understood or followed correctly, or maintenance activity that gets put off. Chances are the single failure of one control might not lead to a top event. But if several fail, and if the holes align, a perfect storm can happen where the threat causes a top event, and the top event causes catastrophic consequences. Let's go back to our bow tie tool. How can we show the holes in each critical control? Let's call these holes degradation factors. Degradation factors are conditions or defects that will compromise the effectiveness of the critical control. How do we deal with these degradations? Through degradation factor controls, which directly address them and work to prevent or manage them. For example, if a spark detector is a critical control for preventing fire, a degradation factor might be the failure of that detector. What can prevent this failure? Maybe one way is to perform preventative maintenance every 2 weeks to test and clean the sensor. Another is to make sure damaged sensors are replaced with like sensors. They can also be part of critical inventory to make sure replacement sensors are available on site. And the sensor's error or alarm messages can be monitored to check if the scheduled preventative maintenance is regular enough. These sample degradation factor controls are put in place with the goal of making sure the critical control works 100% of the time. On our tool, they are shown as an arm of each critical control. In this video, we've taken a closer look at all the elements of the bow tie analysis tool and discussed controls, critical controls, and ways to prevent critical controls from degrading. In the next video, we'll look more closely at how to manage critical controls.